Hi, welcome to Mr. Otter Studio. Today I'm going to show you how to draw a tulip and paint it using watercolors. This is a great tutorial for beginners. I'm going to show you how to draw the tulip. I'm going to show you some really simple watercolor techniques as we paint this tulip. The first one is a gradated wash, going from dark to light or light to dark, and then also how to glaze or layer your watercolor. The third thing I'll show you is how to use the complementary color or the color that's across from it on the color wheel to neutralize your color or make it a little bit grayer or duller or darker. The colors we're going to be using are red, green, and orange. So it's a really simple color palette that we're using, and the tulip only has this tulip only has 7 petals, so it's pretty easy to draw. These are the supplies that you need. You need watercolor paper, watercolors, water in a container. You can use one paintbrush, but I'm going to be using 2 paintbrushes, a flat 3/4 inch and a number 10 round, a pencil, I'm using this mechanical pencil, a paper towel, and some scratch paper to test out your colors on. This one is optional. You can use masking tape to tape your borders if you would like to. All right, let's get started. If you want to use the masking tape to tape your borders, go ahead and do that right now. And I like to just take my finger and press down the edges of my tape to make sure it's sealed. The first thing we're going to do is draw this tulip. I'll put a picture of it up in this corner. So the first thing we're going to do is just draw the shape of the whole tulip. So what we're going to do is just draw a square kind of in this part of our paper. A square that's a little bit taller than it is wide. So go ahead and just start and just make a curved line across the top of your paper. Also, I'm going to be drawing dark so that you can see my drawing, but make sure you draw really lightly. So lightly that you don't even need to erase your lines. And then we're going to bring it down and in. So I'm making it come in just a little bit, and then we'll draw the bottom of our box about right here. Go ahead and put the stem in, so it just bends back in this direction. All right, now that I'm just a little bit closer, what we're going to do is just draw another line about right here. This is where the first row of petals comes to. You're kind of keeping this center area open. The first thing you want to do is draw this first petal in on this side. So it starts down just a little bit, so about right here, and then it's going to come up in this direction and then curve back. And it's going to definitely be more round than square. So you can kind of see the shape. Now let's draw it in. So we're gonna start down here and it's gonna curve in just a little bit. Tulips have these kind of tattered edges that are characteristic of them. And when we get to the top, right in the middle, it's just gonna dip down just a little bit, have a little bump, and then it's going to come around and out and kind of bend down towards that area. So let me erase these lines so you can see that petal just a little bit better. And if yours looks a little bit different or it isn't as wavy, that's totally fine. All right, we've drawn one of the main petals. Now let's go ahead and draw the second big one in. And this is the biggest petal that we can see. And it starts up above the bottom of this. So it comes up, just curves in just a little bit, comes around, then makes a big circle. And we can even just draw this circle coming back into this petal. And then to make it look a little bit more like a tulip, so it fits in this circle shape, we're going to make this just a little bit skinnier right here. Once you get to the top, you want to just dip it in a little bit, and it'll have just a few more little dips coming back in over here. So we have our first 2 petals, and then we're going to draw this big one that comes kind of just back behind these 2. I will draw the shape in really quick, just this bump. And now let's make this bump look like a petal. So it actually has kind of a center that's coming this way. So we're gonna just dip it in at the top and bring it down. And it doesn't really curve much more than that. So I'll erase this so you can see it a little bit. All right, now we have 3 petals drawn. We just have 4 left. Let's go ahead and draw this one that's coming out to the side right here. So there's one that's just gonna be going straight up and over and then coming down. And it's going to be coming towards the tulip, and it just disappears behind this petal. Kind of behind it, like this direction, there is a petal that's coming towards, so it's curving in this direction and then almost coming straight down, just bumping a little bit before it does behind this one. And the same thing right behind it, there is another petal that's coming down behind this petal. So let's erase, I'm just going to erase some of these lines we used to draw it with so that you can see it a little bit better. Our last petal is going to start right behind this first one, curve up, and then once it gets to the top, it kind of just makes these bumps, water falling down behind this petal. And that's it. So erase any of your lines that you used to draw this with. You could just leave it like this, or you can paint in some of these green leaves that are coming up from the stem. So I'm just going to bring one up. Some of these are skinny and some of them are quite stout. And some of them look like shark fins too. I'm just gonna put a few of them in, just 3. All right, we're ready to paint. So instead of dipping right into our colors, we're going to be mixing our colors in our tray. And this is so we can mix up enough color to cover large areas and also to make sure that our color is consistent. And if you look at this picture of my tulip, look at where the highlights are. There are some areas that are almost completely white. Those are the areas that you need to look at and make sure they're there, because that really will give this flower the form that it has. Also look at this image and look for the dark areas. So right in here, it's going to be really, really dark. And we're going to paint our background last, and we're going to be painting a dark background behind this. So let's go ahead and mix up a light orange red. Just use your paintbrush to drop some water into your tray. Grab some red, grab some orange. Use your test paper to kind of see what those colors look like and if you like them. It might look really dark, but when you go to paint it, it's actually really light. So like if I mix this around, actually it's not very dark. So I need a little bit more color. You can turn it orange by adding yellow or by just adding straight orange to it. All right, once you get it dark enough, let's go ahead and start from the back to the front. So we're gonna start back here and then we'll move into these petals. These petals we're just going to be painting in completely. You wanna make sure you don't scrub your paper by going over it and over it. So just fill in those petals. Once I finish painting these three in, I'm just gonna rinse my brush off, touch it to my paper, and then I'm just gonna go around some of these edges with my dry brush. So on this one, I'm gonna show you how to create a really simple gradated wash. So what we're going to do is paint along this side, and then we want it to get lighter as it comes into this area right here. So what I'm going to do is rinse off my brush, touch my paper towel, and then I'm just gonna come right along the edge of this with my wet brush. And if I want it to be even lighter than that, what I can do is dry my brush off, and I'm not gonna scrub it, but I am going to lift some of that color off just with my wet brush. And then I'm just gonna keep drying it off and coming back into that wash. Now let's work on this petal over here. So this petal is dark along the back side and really light on the inside. So I'm going to paint this back edge, rinse off my brush, touch my paper towel to dry it off, and then just come right along the front edge so it lightens it up. And then we're going to do the same thing on this petal, making sure we keep this top edge really, really light, and I don't want this color to mix into it. So if you're worried that this color will drip down into your lighter area, you might want to wait until it's completely dry to do this. So I'm just painting in the darker bottom part of this petal, and then I'm just going to add a little water as I move up. I might blot off my brush just a little bit if it's not getting light enough. And if I'm worried about my colors bleeding into these colors up here, I can leave a little bit of white in between them. You can see I've left a little bit of white just in case. And then this petal has a lot of light around this back corner, and then it is a little bit lighter along this edge right here. So start by painting the dark part, which is this bottom part, and then the back side. I feel like this is getting a lot lighter. And I've found, honestly, that the quicker I can paint, usually the better my results are. Then I'm just adding some water and blotting off my paintbrush, coming back along those edges. All right, so there's two ways I showed you to kind of make it go dark to light. One of them is by adding water as you get towards those lighter areas. The other way is just drying off your brush, then just putting pure water on it and painting next to that color, and it will create something like this where it gets lighter. Now we're gonna let this dry before we work on the last technique, which is adding all of the texture and the cool things that are in these tulips. While we wait for it to dry, we're gonna move down to the stem. Go ahead and mix some green into a puddle in your palette. I'm gonna add a little yellow. You can add a little red if you want it to be a little bit more neutral. After you have some green mixed up, go ahead and test it out on your paper. Paint in your stem and your leaves with that green. Okay, let's make it a little bit darker. You can actually just make it darker by using the same color, as you can see. So I'm gonna take that same color and just make these a little bit brighter, a little bit darker, and then add a little bit more green and a little bit of red to that puddle and come in under the flower. And I'm just adding water to it as I bring it down. You can add some shading along these leaves. Just try to keep it consistent. So if the light's coming from this side or that side, try to figure out where those shadows would be. Some of these leaves actually kind of curve in, and that's why they have a little bit of texture on them. So there's going to be a lot more shading in these upper areas. So what we want to do is use the same red puddle we had before. So we have our red puddle mixed up here. I'm going to add more red to it, a little bit more orange. Let's start with this petal and move to the right. Again, if you're left-handed, start on the right side and move to the left. We can see a little bit of texture in here, but not nearly as much as we can see on these two petals. And then it doesn't come all the way to the edge, but just about. And then to make this a little bit smoother, I'm rinsing my brush off, blotting it off, and then I'm just coming along the edge to smooth that line out. And you can do the same thing in here if you want these lines to be a little bit smoother and not jump so quickly. Then let's move to this petal. I'm just picking up from the same puddle. I'm coming right along this edge. And the nice thing with this is I can add some texture to that front petal if I want to. And then there is just a little line that's coming up through the center to the top. And then this whole side is lighter. And I do have a puddle right here that I'm just gonna soak up with my paintbrush. I'm rinsing my paintbrush off and blotting it, and then I'm just coming along this edge. And then in this one, it's way dark down in this part, and then it's going to get a little bit lighter as it moves towards the top. So let's grab that dark red. And when I paint this in, I'm going to try to redefine the edge of this front petal. So that means like I can add a few more little creases or cracks. And then I'm going to just add, there's this little line that's coming up from the center. This is all pretty dark in here, just getting a little bit lighter as it gets towards the top. So to make this top part lighter, I'm just rinsing my brush off, blotting it off, and then just coming along the edge with my brush that's a little bit drier and just smoothing it out a little bit. So again, this one has a lighter area that's very thin along the back, and then it's lighter inside of this. I'm just adding a little bit of water and rinsing my brush and blotting it off as I move towards this side. Rinsing my brush, blotting it off, and then just coming along the edge to make it a smoother transition. All right, now let's let that dry, and I should have done this one before, but I didn't. So let's go to this one, and I'm gonna add a little bit more orange than red. And just come along the back side, rinse your brush off, dry it off a little bit on your paper towel, and just soften that line up. What we're going to do here is we're going to add areas of red, and then we're going to feather our brushes out. If you have a fan brush, it works great. And then we're going to paint in some areas of texture. So let's go ahead and work on this petal first, and then we'll work on this petal. So this is way dark. It doesn't look as dark as I want it to, so I'm gonna add more red. And then it kind of comes up in this direction, and it has two lines, and then the lines are going to be coming out from that. But first we wanna add some more of the shading to this petal. Okay, now once we get to the top, we're gonna do the thing that I talked about before where we feather it out, and we're gonna be going out in these directions from the center. So, and from in this direction from here. And then you can come straight up towards the top. And I would try to go as close to the edge of the petal as you can. Trying not to go onto the other petal like I just did. Something too that's important to keep in mind is this flower, this part right here really is what was in focus. The rest is a little bit blurry. And then let's work on this petal, and this petal has the same thing except that center line is going to come up through here. So grab your red. There's the darkest shadow is along, and I need to make a little bit more dark red or bright saturated red, however you want to say it, is going to come along the back of the petal. Then it's going to get a little bit looser here, and we're going to bring it up through the middle and a little bit on this edge right here. And then we're going to fan our brush out. I'm going to bring it right from this center petal out onto this petal. And towards the top, it actually just gets a little bit shorter. This line does continue up all the way to the top. And this is the part where you could add your green and you could add some more shading if you would like to. But since this is a beginning tutorial, I'm just going to keep it at this. Keep the background, keep these back petals nice and not showing up too much. But what I do want to do is create a little bit of a shadow with my red and my green on the stem just while I have it ready. So I'm just adding a little bit of red to my green petal, and then I'm just going to paint it onto my stem just a little bit. And then I'm actually going to take that green and come onto the bottom of my flower just a little bit in here. And now let's paint the background. You can choose whatever color you want to use for the background. Just make sure you mix up a lot of it. Really quickly, you can use a light background or a dark background. This is one of my tests. So I usually have to practice a lot of times before I do it. So it looks nice. I think it almost looks better with a lighter background. It's up to you. You could even do a way darker one like black, and then it would really pop off the paper. So what I'm going to do is mix up a dark green red, and that's what I'm going to paint my background with. You want it to be more of a gray color. So I'll show you what green and red kind of make almost like this purple color. And that's not bad, but I want it to be a little bit darker. Once you get your nice neutral gray-brown background, load up your brush with paint. The areas I would be careful with are just around the edges and down in here. If you need to, you can use your smaller brush to paint in those areas, but I'm just gonna use my large brush. And if you're left-handed, again, paint right to left. I'm right-handed, so I'm painting left to right. The quicker you can paint it in, the flatter your color will be. And I would rather leave like a little white than overlap my colors. So you'll see me just kind of painting next to it. If my color's really dark, I will paint over it, but this isn't quite as dark as I would like it to be, so. And while my background's drying, I need to add just a little bit more definition in these stems. So I'm going to add a little red to my green, and I'm just gonna re-outline some of these and redefine them just so that they don't get completely lost. You can smooth out those edges with your brush. Once you've added all of the details that we'd like to and you don't feel like it's mixing into your background, you can go ahead and wait for it to dry. As soon as it's dry, you can take your tape off the edges, sign it, and you are finished. So now you know how to glaze and layer and also add texture to those petals. So now what I want you to do is go find another flower, take a picture of it with your phone, with your camera, and try using these techniques to paint. And if you're beginning, try choosing a flower with just one color. Thank you so much for painting with me today. I hope you could understand what I was saying even though I have a cold. Please subscribe if you would like to see more tutorials. Also, we love requests. Today's tutorial was a requested tutorial. So if you've ever wanted to paint something specific or draw something, give us a request. We do have a long list of requests, but we kind of just choose the one that sounds the best to us at that time. So thank you so much for painting with me. I hope you have a wonderful day. See you around on YouTube.